My name is Scott White, Chief Executive of PragmatIC. We make a very low-cost, thin, flexible electronics that allows us to easily tag everyday items. So as an example, in a fast-moving consumer goods product such as food or beverages, we can tag that item to uniquely track it all the way through the supply chain and improve the operational efficiency of how that's delivered to the consumer. My personal background, originally I'm technically trained, and since then I've built 6 technology businesses, including several in the telecom sector which are now sold, and I'm also on the board of Cortexica Vision Systems, which is a visual AI company. So there's probably 2 main trends, one a general and one a specific. From a general perspective, there's been a trend over the last several decades of computing and electronics becoming smaller and more ubiquitous. So we've gone from computers filling an entire room to being in a box that we carry around with us or strap onto our wrist, and we're extending that one level further to actually embed it into everyday real-world items. From a more specific perspective, the interesting trend is really around the ability to use very granular data about what's happening to improve business operations. So think of all the trends around big data and artificial intelligence and so forth. They all rely on having a very rich source of data about what's happening in order to extrapolate and generate business value. And technologies like radio frequency identification, RFID, have allowed people to do that, but today they can only do it for relatively expensive products. So RFID in 2018 was a 15 billion unit market, but primarily on high-value products such as apparel. And if you want to extend that to fast-moving consumer goods, for example, on bottles of shampoo and so forth, it needs to come down in cost by an order of magnitude, and that's where our technology makes it happen. So we have a very unique suite of technologies that allows us to have a combination of thinness, flexibility, and extremely low cost. And there's currently no other company that can do that. So there is competition from the incumbent technologies, which are conventional silicon, which are very well established, very mature, but can't achieve the price point or indeed some of the other form factor requirements of these applications. And there are a few other companies that are trying to do similar things to us, but none have managed to solve the combination of all those key criteria that are required for these applications. We currently are in pilot trials, so a lot of those unfortunately are under non-disclosure arrangements. It is public that we have worked in the past with companies like Unilever and many other large brand owners, and that probably gives an idea of the kinds of applications we used in. So we currently are in the transition from pilot production to volume. Over the last year or two, we've installed our first volume production line, which has a capacity of about 1 billion circuits a year, and that is going to be scaling up production through this year, selling into larger opportunities. So we'd expect as we go through 2019 to have public announcements of these commercial requirements. One example is certainly the supermarket type environment. So there is an initiative by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan, and they're working with 5 convenience stores to tag all of the products they sell in order to enable a very smooth automated checkout experience. And that requires, just for those 5 stores, 100 billion items to be tagged every year. So that's one example and one use case. There are others in healthcare, for example, where already hospitals are putting a lot of effort into tracking expensive items of equipment and ensuring they know where all their assets are. But at the moment, the gap is that they can't track the consumables and the very high volume of transient products like blood samples and so forth that move through that hospital environment. And so our technology can help close that gap and actually allow them to track everything that's happening within the hospital system and get both better patient outcomes as well as reduced costs as they're doing that.
Privacy is a very important question in a lot of these applications. There's a few levels at which privacy can be addressed. One is that in most cases there is no customer-specific information that is actually embedded in an RFID tag or similar product. It's just an ID that allows it to be tracked, but the actual linkage of that to any personal information is typically well protected behind somebody's firewall who's managing that data and has the customer's permission to do so. Beyond that, there are some specific things in the product itself that you can do to mitigate privacy concerns even further, one of the key ones being range of the product. So for certain applications of tracking within supply chains, you want very long read range to make it very easy to track items wherever they are. But typically when it goes into the consumer domain, you're actually more interested in very short range interactions. Think of what we've got used to doing with Apple Pay and Android Pay, where you tap a terminal to pay for something. That same concept extends to when we're looking at consumer interaction with these kinds of products. It's using near-field communications, which fundamentally is a very, very short range technology, and hence actually only has an interaction with the consumer and collecting any data from them if they consciously choose to interact with it. Specifically in applications like RFID, the key benefit is being able to put a unique digital identity on any item and be able to track that through the entire life cycle of that product. So right from source manufacturing through the supply chain to improve inventory control and how efficient that supply chain is, into the retail environment, ensure the product's on the shelf at the right time, and then even into the consumer environment so it can interact with the consumer, help them understand the product, its benefits, connect them directly with the brand that's provided it, and at the end of life, direct them to recycle it or reuse it in the appropriate way. So that's really the ultimate goal of what companies are trying to do with our technology, is have that completely ubiquitous traceability of items for security, operational efficiency and consumer benefit, and do that on everything.